It's time now for Entre Nous with Solange Moujon, who joins me on the set. Hi, Solange.
Hi,
today you are tackling the very difficult art of translation. Now, it's difficult to translate French words at times. It's true. You're also going to talk to us about the plight of translators, particularly in the face of AI. But let's start first with some fun lists.
Well, preparing for this segment, I began thinking about all of the words, all of the French words and expressions that are hard to translate. So I have compiled a few very incomplete lists for you. And I hope that they show how translating is about creating bridges, about dialogue between different languages and people. Here in France, there is often much discussion about how English words have seeped into the French language. So I thought I would start with the opposite, or French words that Anglophones use, like chic, déjà vu, raison d'être, fiancé, the somewhat untranslatable bon appétit, which for me actually sparks, bon appétit has more spark, more joie de vivre than enjoy your meal. And on this list, there are actually two words that Francophones do not actually use or use very often. There's brunette, which French people wouldn't say. They would say brune, as in je suis brune, or I have brown hair. And then there is the expression je ne sais quoi, which I guess you could say, but more often you'll hear a French-speaking person say elle ou il a du charme, as in attractiveness, and not necessarily, but possibly charm in English. Now, I have another list for you, the famous faux amis, or false friends. And here, the two straightforward matches, well, they do not always work. A journey is not the same as a journée or a day. Same thing with the English pain. It does not mean bread or pain in French. Now, these false friends, they are well known in language classes. But what about the more nuanced meanings of certain French words? One of my favorites that's quite difficult to translate is voilà. It is used all the time here. But there you go doesn't really capture its use. Same thing with retrouvailles. The English term is reunion or meeting. And it doesn't, for me, encapsulate the sort of sense of connection that the word has in French. And then, of course, there are all of the expressions and idioms. There are lots of fun books on these. I've selected just a few here that can be tricky, such as n'importe quoi. Francophones say this a lot in both humorous situations, but also in anger, potentially. Ditto the expression tout à l'heure. It can be à tout à l'heure, or see you later, just like it can be earlier. Je l'ai vu tout à l'heure. I saw someone earlier. All of this to say that the complexities are quite great, which makes for the beauty and the complexity of translation.
Absolutely. There's some really great ones on that list. Every year, the United Nations actually celebrates an International Translation Day, September 30th. Tell us a bit more.
Well, September 30th is the feast day of Saint Jerome, who translated the Bible into Latin, and he is considered to be the patron saint of translators. And the Bible actually remains the world's most translated book. It, and also things like the Rosetta Stone, they are just two reminders of the role that translation has had over the centuries and continues to have in our lives today. The United Nations today, and also the European Union, well, they are actually two of the largest employers of translators and interpreters in the world. For the EU, for example, there are some 250 parliamentary employees who take care of language services, and some 1,500 freelancers that do the same. This to the cost of about €1 billion a year. Now, this may seem like a lot of money, but it's actually less than 1% of the communal budget. And in the end, it does allow for us to have this ability to understand and communicate with one another. But both the EU and the UN, like other organizations and industries and companies, well, they are decreasing these services as artificial intelligence nibbles away at translation work.
Right. And this is really a huge talking point, particularly here in France, with artificial intelligence perfecting things like, for example, just a machine translation. Could the art of being a translator die out?
Well, since 1954, when IBM launched a machine translation system, and then there's Babelfish in the 1990s and Google Translate in 2006, and now even more perfected simultaneous AI systems, the work of translating has become more automated, of course, and the number of jobs with this have declined. It has declined. But at the same time, translators are still very much needed. Pop any simple text into Google Translate, and the results are far from perfect. We've all had this experience with simple text, let alone ones where there are judgment calls that are needed, novels, complex dossiers, humor, and all the nuances of language. And to boot, the number of errors actually increases with less common languages. Here at the MIT Technology Review, they found that Wikipedia pages, for example, in rare languages are often machine translated and full of nonsensical sentences and errors. Those pages are then fed into AI systems, which then reproduce them. It says that it is a complicated and complex problem that boils down to garbage in, garbage out. So the human mind and the critical eye of translators, well, it is still needed, even if the tools of their jobs are changing.
That's good to hear. Now, here in France, those of us that live here know that there are several mechanisms that are actually in place to try and protect the French language. And this is why we often see translations, for example, on ads.
Yeah, the love and safeguard of the French language is a very vast subject. But quickly here, there are some laws, namely the 1994 Tout Bon law, which ensures that French is used in contracts, in schools, in advertising, and in lots of different sectors. And that is actually why in France, when you see an English word, you'll often see an asterisk and then a translation in French below it. Today, English has very much seeped into the lives of many Francophones and many other languages as well. But there will always be those terms that have that extra nuance or two. And if you're curious about this, I highly recommend the Positive Lexicography project, where you can actually pick any emotion and then say love, for example, and then pick the language and the emotion and then the language. And then you have all of the terms that have their own very precious and nearly untranslatable meanings on the site.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to check it out. Solange, thank you so much for that on this International Translation Day. That's our Solange Mougin. Thanks to you for watching France 24. Stay with us.